it's Alice, and today we're gonna wrap up the books I read in January. I finished 4 books in January, which is pretty good for me, and I feel like it was a good start to the year. And the first book that I finished was The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman. This is the 3rd book in the Thursday Murder Club series, which is like a cozy mystery series, and it's one of my favorites. And this series basically follows a group of pensioners who live in this retirement village, and they love murders and mysteries, and they love solving them, and they keep getting involved in them somehow. Sometimes they get dragged into them, and sometimes they just put themselves into these cases so that they can help solve them. If you've been on this channel a lot, you will know that I love this series, and I've enjoyed all of the books in it so far, and I really enjoyed this one as well. There's not really that much I can say about this without just like saying everything I've said about the previous books. So just to summarize, these books are just delightful. They're very charming and enjoyable and entertaining, and usually the mysteries in them are quite clever, which I really like. I can never figure out really what's going on in these books, although to be fair, I can never figure out any mystery books really. Like, some people are really good at that, like they can just read it and figure out who has done it. That's very rare for me, but I feel like the plots in these are clever and intriguing, and I do love the characters. Like, reading these books just feel like visiting old friends again, which is just wonderful. These books are just so fun for me to read, and they're funny as well. And for me, it's usually quite difficult to find books that have a lot of humor in it, where it actually works for me and it doesn't get like too ridiculous. But in these, it just works really well. I feel like they're balanced very well. I felt like this was another great addition to the series. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was delightful. The second book that I read was The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, which is a historical fiction novel, and it's set in Florence in the 1550s. And we follow this young woman who is the 3rd daughter of a Grand Duke, and she is a little bit different from all of her other siblings, and she just seems to live in her own world a little bit, and she can't quite like follow the rules that everyone else can follow, and she's very creative and a little bit wild. And she loves her life in the castle. Maybe she wanted more freedom, but like generally she's quite happy there. But then something happens where she is forced to marry this mystifying man who was supposed to marry her sister, but then her sister dies, and everyone just decides that our main character can marry this guy instead. So I have a lot of thoughts about this book, and it's a book that I've thought a lot about since I finished it. And I think the reason is that it was what I expected, but then it also wasn't what I expected, and I feel a little bit torn as to how to feel about it. The main thing that I love about O'Farrell is her writing style. It's very descriptive, and it really, like, just the way that she describes things works so well for me. And she spends a lot of time describing things, and it's something about the way that she does it, where if she's telling you about a character and she's describing a character, she will like get that one little detail that will make you go, oh yeah, I recognize that, and I immediately know what kind of person that is. Or you're just like, yeah, I see exact, like, it just, there's something about the way that she describes characters and everything in it that just pulls me in. And I know that this writing style is not for everyone, I totally get it, but for me, it just does so much for me. And I did love that in here. Like, I just love the writing, and I love the words. Now, the story is the part that kind of lost me a little bit. The thing is, when I started this book, and I was at like the beginning of the story, where we meet this girl and we're introduced to her and we see her life in the castle, like, I loved all of that, and I love that she's so different from everyone around her, and we really get into her head and see what that's like for her, and you totally just like understand her. And I loved all of that, like seeing her grow up. But then we get to like maybe around the middle of the story where she is like 16, and she stays 16 for the remainder of the story. And there's something about like that part that just lost me a little bit. Like, there's a change in scenery and change in like what characters were around, and there's something about it that just, I felt like I lost my connection to her. And there's like a part in there that felt very flat for me, which is kind of weird because I still loved the writing, but the story was just like, it just got a little bit flat. The end does pick back up though, and I did really like the ending, but I think I had just expected us to get more out of this character's life. And if you've read the book, you'll know why we don't get any more, but I just thought that there would be more to it, and I just wanted more, which I guess is a good thing. But I think the thing is, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell is one of my favorite books that I've ever read, and I love that book so much. And when I finished that book, I was like heaving because it made such an impact on me. And I think because I read that book, I have really high expectations of Maggie O'Farrell's books, and this didn't give me the same feeling. It was more just like, okay, I read that and I enjoyed it, and that was kind of it. Maybe my expectations of this were just super high though, like maybe that's the main problem, but I just missed a little bit of that strong emotional connection that I felt when I read Hamnet. And I know that that's rare, but there is something about the writing style of Maggie O'Farrell that can really do that for me. And I felt it in like flares throughout the story, but I didn't quite like get it, and it did just lose me a little bit at the end. I would still recommend this though, but for a very specific crowd of people, and you have to like be into this kind of writing style, otherwise this book will just like, you'll hate it if you don't like the writing. I am very torn as to what to rate this though, and I've been thinking about it for the last couple of weeks since I finished this, and for me the writing is like 5 out of 5, and the story is maybe like 3 out of 5, and the characters are like somewhere between 3 and 4, and I'm just very torn. I feel like a 4-star rating is a little bit too much, and a 3-star rating is like way too little. So I don't know what to rate it, but I think maybe I'm just gonna give it a 4, but it is somewhere between like 3 and 4. Moving on, I read The Honjin Murders by Saishi Yokomizo. This is a classic mystery novel. It's translated from Japanese, and it's set in this rural village in Japan in 1937, where 2 newlyweds are murdered on their wedding night. And it appears like the murderer wouldn't have a way out of the crime scene, which leaves our detective with a very narrow pool of suspects. It's always fun to read a classic mystery, and I always love reading translated books, so I was really looking forward to this. And I would say that it's the kind of book where like some things worked really well for me and some things didn't. For me, the most intriguing part of the story was definitely the plot and like the setup and the murder and all of that. I really liked being introduced to this village and seeing how everything works and meeting the people in it, and there are a lot of cultural aspects to this that I felt like were explained really, really well, which I really enjoyed. I also think that the mystery is very intriguing in the way that locked room mysteries usually are, and I really enjoyed like seeing the story and seeing it unfold, and like there are some obvious red herrings, but I enjoyed that as well, and I could not figure out the solution to the mystery, which, to be fair, it is pretty wild, so I don't know how anyone would really figure it out. The story is structured in kind of an interesting way, where in the beginning of the book, there's this unnamed narrator who is telling us that this was like a wild mystery, and he has gathered all of these different viewpoints and like witness statements and all of that, and that's how we're told the story, and that's also how we are introduced to the main detective that we meet in here. The thing that I liked the least in here, and the thing that I felt like I missed, was a character that I could really like latch onto. Because of the way the narration is structured, we're sort of several layers away from what's actually happening, and that just made me feel very removed from the story, and like I just felt like I couldn't really connect to anyone in here. There are also a lot of characters in this book, which I don't always mind. It is a little bit confusing, but sometimes in mystery novels, having a lot of characters, like, it's supposed to be confusing. And sometimes I'm okay with that if I like feel a really strong connection to the detective or something. But I felt like I couldn't quite grasp him in here. Like, he is a brilliant detective, but I didn't feel any connection to him. And we were never really inside anyone's head or anything. Like, not in a way that I felt connected to. And I just really missed that. For me, who is a reader where, yes, the plot is important, but the characters are even more important, this just didn't quite reach me. And it was just kind of one of those books that I sat down with and I read and I enjoyed it when I was in it. And that's just kind of it. For me, this is a very, like, solid 3 out of 5 star book, and I'm glad I read it. Lastly, I read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, which is a fantasy novel where we follow this teenage girl who has all of this dark power and no one really likes her, and she goes to this school. She's in her 3rd year, and this school is really strange because there are no teachers, there are no holidays. These kids are just stuck there for the 4 years that they're there, and they kind of just have to survive, but they do also have to study somehow. And it's kind of hard to explain because the school is like built into a void, and the reason it's so dangerous is that there are all these creatures that want to eat them, but these creatures are also outside of the school, and there's kind of like, they kind of are not supposed to be able to get into the school, but they do, and there's this void that it's, you know what, it's very complicated. But it's basically about this teenage girl who goes to a magical school that kind of wants to kill her. So this is an interesting one because I feel like my enjoyment level of this book was very, very high, but my rating is probably not going to be that high because there were some things that I didn't love about the book, but like I enjoyed it a lot and I had a lot of fun reading it. This is the kind of book where immediately when you begin it, you're just dropped into the story. And you meet this character who's in her 3rd year, and she's like already in the middle of a lot of stuff, and you kind of just have to go with it. I feel like that worked pretty well. I didn't feel like it was all that confusing. Like some things, when you like see it or come across it for the first time, you're like, I don't know what that is. But the book does a good job of like explaining it to you as you go. Because of that, there is a lot of information in here because there's no previous world building, and you're not really introduced to this character before she goes to the school. You just meet her when she's there, and you have to all just figure it out. I think the world that's created in here is really cool. Even if I don't fully understand how everything works, I really like the school, and I like that the school is kind of like its own entity, and the school is basically the teacher. And so I don't quite understand how they're signed up for classes or anything, but they are somehow. And like the void that the school is built into will like give them books, and like the library is really cool where it like changes all the time and you can get lost. And it's very dangerous, obviously, and a little bit unorganized, I feel, but everything in the school kind of wants to kill you, so it makes sense that it's a little bit chaotic. The thing that didn't quite work for me, or that I like struggled a little bit with, but now that I think about it, I maybe, like, it's weird because this is one of those books where I feel like on a reread I would enjoy it even more because more things would make sense to me. But like the main character, when we meet her, I just didn't quite get her in a way, and I kind of forgot that she's very young. She's in her teens and she's very immature and she makes a lot of immature decisions, and like the way she acts is a little bit annoying. But then also, like when you think about it, she is very young and she's in this environment where there are no adults, there are only kids, and it's like the whole culture of it is very difficult to deal with. And she also has this like dark power that she can't quite figure out, or she struggles with. And so she has a lot of stuff going on, and so it makes sense that she is the way she is. But it just took me a little while to like warm up to her, I guess. I did really like the friendship that is at the center of the story though. Like them two together is just quite funny, I think. And I think it's very interesting that the main character, this is like her first friend, and she acts the way she does because she doesn't know how to have friends. I did quite like the writing as well. I did read some reviews where like the main complaint was like info dumping. I don't know that I really mind that so much. Like I feel like we kind of needed it because of the way the story is structured, but I don't know. I liked the writing. I think overall, all of the elements all put together means that this is like a 3-star read for me. It's not quite strong enough to be a 4, but maybe on a reread, when I get the character, like the main character a little bit more, I would give it 4 stars. I don't know, but it's a 3 for now. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. I love the dark academia vibes, although I will say the book was less dark than I thought it was going to be, but I think maybe that's just me who, like, when you talk about dark things, I mean like really, really dark things. Like that's what I want. But yeah, a little less dark than maybe I would have liked, but very enjoyable. I really liked it. Okay, everyone, those were all the books that I read in January and all of the books that I had to talk about today. I'd love to know what you all have been reading lately, and as always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!